Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Brianna Brim. I'm an assistant professor of occupational therapy at Salus University in Elkins Park. I'm here today joined by 4 of our most senior occupational therapy student interns who will be helping us throughout this presentation and presenting the majority of the material. I am going to let them introduce themselves in just a moment. So thank you all for coming. I know decluttering right now might feel like a daunting, but especially important task, as a lot of us are finding we're spending more and more time at home due to COVID. So we're hoping that we can get some helpful information out for you and make this process a little bit easier and hopefully a little bit more enjoyable. So with that, I'm going to let our interns introduce themselves and we'll dive right into the content.
Hi, my name is Mary Zhu.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tavi L.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole DeRobertis.
And hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Kaplan. So welcome and thank you for coming today. So we're here to talk with you about tips and tricks when it comes to everyone's least favorite activity, decluttering. Everyone knows decluttering is something they should do, but we're going to break it down into some easy steps to start the process so that it doesn't become overwhelming. We've prepared some information for you all on common questions and popular topics regarding decluttering. Our main goal today is to answer your questions about your own homes and to be a resource for all and any concerns. We want this to be as interactive as possible and provide a safe space to welcome questions along the way and have a discussion at the end. We've provided a handout so that you can keep track of some of these tips for later. So let's first talk about why you signed up for this class. How many of you signed up for this class because you're downsizing?
You can feel free to share your thoughts in the chat box, raise your hand, or if you are calling in, just remember you have to hit *6 to unmute and remute yourself. Leonard, why did you sign up? Leonard, yeah, there you go.
Okay, this isn't really Leonard. This is somebody else.
Hello.
But because I have a lot of clutter and it's really hard for me. It's all papers and books mixed together.
Well, we definitely are going to hit on a good amount of that content today to try to help you with some of that for sure. We have a lot of people in the room who are here they're thinking about downsizing. How many of you are kind of here because, maybe you're noticing some more clutter since you have been spending more time at your home? Anybody in that boat?
Yes, me.
Things are starting to be a little bit more apparent that maybe there's some areas you want to work on a little bit, right? I think that's happened to a lot of us. So we're definitely going to work through some of those strategies as well today. Does anyone else have any other reason why they signed up for this class in particular?
I see in the chat box that a couple people have said some stuff. Linda said she's downsized but didn't feel she got rid of enough stuff. Some other people have said they've had the problem for years. Yeah, and I would probably like to add too, it's like maybe you just want to change in your environment. You're kind of just want a new scenery. Or maybe you're having trouble finding something to only find that it's like buried under other items. Or even you may find yourself avoid going into certain rooms or even not letting people go into certain rooms when you have company over. Has that happened to anybody?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Linda, we're all feeling the same kind of way. So I think the important thing to remember is a lot of us have experienced the same thing. So, right, we're all dealing with similar situations and that kind of sentiment of I downsized, but I didn't get rid of enough, or I still have a lot of things, or I tried this and now I'm kind of stuck, or I just don't know where to begin. Those are all really common and really valid points. So we're going to try to work through a lot of different strategies today. Some of them you might kind of really identify with as a huge barrier for yourself that we can kind of overcome. Some of the tips you might not find as helpful. And we're really here to introduce a variety of ways that you can kind of go about this process so that you can find what works for you. because this is a hard process, but it's also a really individualized process. So we're going to hit on as many different things as we possibly can today. And in our handout, there's a lot more specific information as well, which you may find kind of really speaks to you on maybe that one room that's really problematic for you, versus other spaces that you feel like are pretty functional for yourself. All right, Steph, go right ahead.
So don't worry, and we're here to walk you through that process. So first, you may be wondering what occupational therapy even has to do with decluttering, or what occupational therapists even do. Don't worry, we get that question all the time. Occupational therapy focuses on improving an individual's ability to perform meaningful activities of daily living, such as bathing, dressing, feeding, household and community management, work, and social participation. It's within our scope of practice to observe, assess, and make recommendations for your environment to improve performance in these daily activities in order to establish a safe person-environment interaction. Most importantly, we provide client-centered care, which means you come first. So whatever's important to you and your goals and your concerns, it's important to us. So now we're going to bring it back to this class and how decluttering affects our everyday life. Clutter often goes unnoticed because we adapt around it. However, when these adaptations start to become safety or fall hazards, we know we need to make a change. When you feel like your home environment's starting to control your normal routine, that means it's time to take back your space. So now we're going to mention the challenges associated with decluttering that I'm sure we've all experienced. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, it's not very fun. It can be hard to find the time to go through the items in your house, as well as, frankly, not knowing where to start or how to go about organizing. I know if I'm overwhelmed, I tend to just put things off. But today we're going to give you some tips and tricks on how to get the job done with little stress. So now let's talk about why decluttering even matters. Well, there are a bunch of reasons, but here are a few. It creates a safer home environment. The less stuff on the floor means the less likely you will be able to trip and fall. And we know each year, 1 in 3 adults falls according to the CDC. And the best way to prevent these falls is to remove excess clutter. It also reestablishes a connection with your home. It increases time spent with your friends in your home. And decluttering has also been shown to increase overall well-being and decrease stress.
So for some of you, knowing the benefits of decluttering is going to be a really helpful thing to keep in the back of your mind. And it's going to be a really motivating factor. If you know that overall, it's going to help you decrease your stress, it's going to help you find new and better uses for your home, and potentially re-engaged with loved ones who maybe you have been less likely to have over. Obviously, we're all having less people over because of COVID, but maybe, even let people who are kind of in that initial little bubble that you have. This might be enough. Just knowing that it's going to potentially decrease stress, increase well-being. There's actually been some clinical studies that have shown it even can help reduce high blood pressure just because you're reclaiming your space. So for some of you, this is all you need. You're like, okay, this is great. This is going to help me. Then I know I can keep that in the back of my mind. We're still going to go through a lot of practical tips because even if we know something is good for us, that doesn't necessarily make it the easiest to incorporate into our lifestyle, right? I think we all know we're supposed to drink more water, and how many of us are really able to get enough. So we're still going to go through practical tips, but this is just kind of to frame it that there are a lot of benefits to decluttering for your mental and actual physical well-being.
So now we're going to switch gears and talk about how you can take 4 simple steps to start the decluttering process. First, it's important to make the time. Second, prioritize. Third, set accomplishable goals. And we don't want to make these goals so high that they're unrealistic, which we all know can deter you from continuing. And finally, reward yourself. It's important to acknowledge that decluttering is hard, and we're more likely to continue if we do reward ourselves. So these 4 steps are going to be the basis for the entire process. So remember to refer back to them. Now we're going to dive deeper into each of these 4 steps.
So keep these as kind of in the back of your mind as the things you're always going to come back to, making the time, prioritizing, setting accomplishable goals, and rewarding yourselves. If you can kind of keep this as your logical flow in your decluttering process, it's going to make your life easier.
Oh, I see in the chat, some people made some additional comments.
Great.
We have Faye, she said that, or he or she said COVID/quarantine made the situation worse. In my case, 2 people working from home with offices, which weren't offices before the pandemic. And then we have Shirley. She said working on PhD, compiling articles, increased the volume of paper. So now there's no space for dining.
Those are both very relatable. Shirley, I am in a similar situation to you for it, both of those, as far as, and Faye, as far as 2 people working from home, having to create 2 office spaces that weren't there. I definitely recognize that. And we're going to talk about some of that space delineation and what to do with paper and how to manage it. I'm also working on my PhD, and literally sitting on the floor right next to me is my binder of all those papers. So totally can relate. But there's a lot of things that we can do to kind of restructure and think about some of those tips. So some of those things, we're going to make sure we leave time at the end to dive into some more specific situations and how we can kind of reclaim certain spaces. I think as we go through some of these things, you'll be able to pull out and you'll see, okay, that definitely is one that resonates with me. So we'll make sure we hit on some even more specific situations and come back to some of that extra paper clutter. But I think as we go through, you'll see some of them, we hit on that as we go.
Okay, so the first step we talked about was making the time. So if you take 15 minutes per day, and I'm saying 15 minutes only, you can actually get a lot done. This will add up and break up the process so it doesn't become overwhelming. So you might be able to go through a small space while you wait for a delivery, or maybe while you're waiting for your hair to dry. Maybe do it while you're on hold with that doctor's office. Or tackling a small space while your favorite show is on a commercial break is another great idea. So to make things go by even faster, try playing some music. Who knows, you may end up doing more than you initially thought, or even dancing around the room.
Think about time as reclaiming your time too. So you're not just reclaiming your space, you're reclaiming time. Have you found opportunities that are kind of wasted? So maybe you have something in the oven and it's got another 10 minutes. Can you take that 10 minutes and try to tackle a couple areas of clutter in your home in just a very short burst of time? People who start the process with these short bursts tend to be able to make the time and stick with their decluttering goals a lot better than folks who decide they're going to start on these massive projects. Now, I do want to comment that if you are someone who has a larger project, like you have a basement that you know you need to get to, obviously you're going to have to devote a significant amount of time to some of these larger spaces. But when you're starting the process and you're really trying to declutter from scratch, starting with these like very small periods of time is actually the best way to A, build confidence in your skills, B, get practice of incorporating some of the tricks that we're going to tell you. And that's going to actually make those bigger projects go quicker, easier, and you're going to already have resources lined up so you know what to do with all those objects. So definitely start with the 15 minutes as your introduction into the decluttering process. And then as you get more comfortable and confident in your decluttering skills, then start to devote larger chunks of time for some of those bigger projects, like a couple hours for maybe reorganizing that office and reclaiming certain spaces.
So the second step was prioritize. So determine where the decluttering process should begin is always a good idea.
So maybe try to make a list of your top 5 places you want to declutter. I usually start with smaller spaces and build up to the most intimidating, which for me is usually my pantry.
Yeah, that pantry always gets cluttered. Also finding someone to help as initiating the process is one of the hardest parts. This way you don't have to tackle it alone.
This could be someone as a supportive family member or a friend who is also trying to declutter, or someone you can even call while you're going through the items. It's also a good idea. You may even find that supportive friend right here in this class.
And starting somewhere small, such as a countertop or that one shelf in your closet, is a great idea as well. And remember to only tackle one item at a time. So, the next step mentioned earlier was to set accomplishable goals. So, setting goals that are manageable and easy to accomplish. So, let's go back to that one shelf I just mentioned. A good, reasonable goal would be to tackle that one shelf in your closet by the end of the weekend. If we focus on making slow and incremental changes, we won't get overwhelmed.
I know that my parents have said before that they were going to clean out the whole entire attic in one day, and that was always the biggest disaster. They barely even finished a corner. So, starting with smaller areas is definitely key to avoid feeling overwhelmed and making progress.
Yeah, my parents have done that as well, and it did not end well. So it's also important to acknowledge that these big projects take time, patience, and energy. And a good way to conserve some of your energy is to bring a box or a bag to the sofa so you can go through the contents like while you're sitting.
If you've been someone who's experienced some balance changes or had a recent stumble or maybe even had some medication changes, it's important to recognize that that's going to alter, your endurance and your ability to kind of do some of these activities while standing for a period of time. So something like putting things in a box and going through it while sitting is a great way to just keep yourself safe if you are that type of individual. It also might make it feel a little bit more manageable when things are kind of spread out in front of you and you can go through them all and see everything at once, especially if you can manage to do it while you're watching a TV show and then just come back to it on commercial breaks.
So, now that we've covered the 4 big steps needed to begin the decluttering process, let's talk about the different categories to sort your belongings into. The 5 categories that we are going to focus on when sorting items are trash, donate, sell, store, and keep. Now let's talk more in depth about which items fall into which category.
So it's really important that when you're trying to set your goals and you're trying to go through your things, you automatically start to get your brain to put the items into one of these 5 categories. And we're going to give you some tips to kind of help determine what really is worth selling, what's really should be trashed, and what is meaningful to donate.
So the first category is trash. You might currently be asking yourself what items in your home are considered trash. Some items would be a broken item. If an item is broken and it is not safe to use, or it no longer can serve the purpose it was intended for, then there is no reason to keep it as it is just taking up space in your home. Another category would be out of fashion items, such as encyclopedias or that dress you haven't worn in 40 years. Maybe you have items in your home that you just can't find a reason to keep. Perhaps you have an old TV that you have since replaced and it is just taking up space in your basement. One thing to keep in mind when discarding old TVs and electronics is that these items can't just be thrown away the same way your everyday trash can. So, shortly, we will talk about ways that you can discard these items. Additionally, you might have items that no one else would be able to reuse, such as undergarments and bathing suits. These items can go in your trash pile along with any items that are damaged. As you start to accumulate trash, keep in mind that your trash bags and boxes may become heavy. If you have a history of back problems or balance concerns, it is recommended that you ask for help when lifting these heavy bags and be mindful of trash collection days so that trash is not sitting in your home for long periods of time.
So with trash donation, we're going to talk specifically about how to discard certain items and where you can discard certain items. It's important to remember that in this process, you should be thinking about when some of these specialty items can and will be collected. So most counties have specified dates for things like hazardous wastes, like old paint or maybe cleaners that you're no longer using or things like that, as well as electronics like used batteries or computer parts, or if you have old printers and things like that. Oftentimes the trash won't take them because of some of the components of them. And most counties have dates. So when you're thinking about cleaning, try to coordinate your timelines. Go to your county website, see when those dates are, and then start to collect it, because there's nothing worse than then having just a giant box of trash items that you know you're not actually going to be able to dispose of for another 2 months.
So as mentioned, not all items such as old TVs and appliances can be thrown out in your everyday trash. Best Buy stores offer recycling kiosks where you can drop off rechargeable batteries, wires, cords, cables, as well as plastic bags. Best Buy will also haul away a major appliance or a TV from your home for a fee of $24.99 when a replacement product is purchased and delivered. You can also check in with your county to find out about trash and recycling days and learn more about which items are acceptable. A link to a website can be found on page 1 of your handout, and if you go to that website and type in your address, you can learn more about your local trash and recycling days.
I just want to emphasize the importance of properly discarding trash, because a friend of mine's, when he just started his property management and he was newly renovating a home, and they didn't use all of the paint. So he thought that he could just, put the paint out with the rest of the trash. But when the trash people came and, threw the trash in there, and the back of the trash came to crush the trash, the paint can exploded everywhere. Because we're not talking about, a little small pint, but gallon of paint, and it crushed everywhere and exploded. So people cars are covered with yellow paint. Can you imagine coming outside and seeing your car covered with yellow paint on it? So we have to be mindful, and let's please be considerate of disposing trash properly.
Yeah,
If
that's
you're
so crazy.
It is so unfortunate. If you're somebody who is kind of in the process, so in my house, we're trying to switch to rechargeable batteries because they just last a little bit longer. We can charge them. It's going to be cheaper over time for us. But we're finding that we have some batteries. So we just keep a glass jar, and every time we have a battery that needs to be discarded, we put it in the jar. So then it's not as obtrusive, and then I can get rid of it when we have one of those mass recycling days, or drop it off to Best Buy. So that's one way that you can kind of manage some of these trash items in a situation where there's not going to be obtrusive. So the same thing with cords and cables. I'm sure a lot of us have like extra cables and cords lying around. Half of them we don't even know what they're to. Maybe you have old cell phones that you're trying to get rid of. Start a shoebox and just put them in there, and then periodically go through that shoebox so you don't just have them scattered throughout your house.
Okay. Now let's talk about donating. Donating items is a great way to help out someone less fortunate. Items that are gently used, such as clothes, books, and furniture, can be donated. These items will be put to better use by someone in need rather than buried in your closet or taking up space on a shelf in your basement. When donating items, keep in mind that they have to be in usable condition. You can't donate clothes that are torn or items that are broken. Here are 2 donation centers in the Philadelphia area. Green Drop accepts gently used clothing, household goods, and small furniture that weighs less than 50 pounds. They do not accept large appliances or large pieces of furniture. You can drop the items off yourself or schedule for them to be picked up by your local Green Drop center. Restore is another donation center that accepts furniture and appliances, as well as building supplies such as lumber, plumbing, and roofing supplies. If you have items that you would like to donate to Restore, you can schedule an appointment for a free donation pickup. More information about both of these donation centers can be found on page 2 of your handout, and you can visit their website for more detailed information about the types of items they accept.
Restore is kind of an interesting resource for us to use because they accept a lot of the things that you kind of are thinking, what do I really do with this? So maybe you replaced a chandelier and you have the old one and you're not really sure. Or when I moved into my house, because it's an older house, I had boxes of tile from like 3 renovations ago, and Restore was able to take those. So some of those strange objects that you may have found when you moved into a house, obviously check with your landlord if it was there and you're renting, but that they can be a really great resource for some of those kind of odds and end objects.
So maybe you've completed a large portion of your decluttering and you are left with a pile of items that you're not quite sure what to do with. You're not sure whether the items are trash or if they could be donated. If this is the case, Junk Luggers is a company that can help. They will take almost anything with the exception of hazardous materials from your home. They will then sort through your items and donate as much stuff as possible. The remaining items will be brought to appropriate recycling facilities. Please be aware that there is a fee for their services. Okay, so now let's talk about books. I know a lot of people, myself included, always struggle to find places that accept book donations. Books Through Bars is an organization that focuses on collecting and accepting book donations. However, they do not accept hardcover books, out-of-date nonfiction books, old magazines, or books that are in poor condition. The types of books they need is constantly changing, so please contact them to find out if your books meet the current donation criteria.
It's important to remember if you're dealing with children's books, if you have a lot of children's books or maybe young adult nonfiction from grandchildren or children or anything of that nature, that oftentimes some schools, some preschools, and even at SALIS, our Speech Language Institute, often has book drives for that reason. So that can be a great thing to keep on your radar. If you're not kind of following our Speech Language Institute, they're always looking for donations of books because they use it with so many of our clients. So that might be another great resource for you to think about, as unfortunately, hardcovers aren't allowed through these Books Through Bars programs. Now, when they say out-of-date nonfiction, they are specifically talking about encyclopedias, which I am sure some of us have in the basement still collecting dust. Unfortunately, in finding a venue for encyclopedias is pretty much impossible at this point. No one really wants them because they go out of date so quickly. So those unfortunately will generally end up in the trash, but you may be able to, repurpose some of the papers for craft projects or see if any like Girl Scout, Boy Scout troops would be willing to use them for certain crafts.
Oh, we have some more comments. in the
Great.
chat.
I was just going to say, Faye mentioned that she always has, or they always have so much to read, different like magazines, articles, and stuff. Another tip that I'm not sure if we did mention in this class, but we talked about in our last class, was about possibly if you have like an article in one magazine, about like ripping that article out of the magazine and having just like a folder that you can stuff that page into. So when you do have your free time, you can just go look through that folder. So it takes up less space. So that's just a tip that you could think about.
Definitely. And you can also think about too, if there is just a specific article, can you copy it? We're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but can you copy that article and digitize it, leave it on your computer, put it on a flash drive, something along those lines. So you kind of have it for easier reading down the road. Were there more comments in the Sorry, friends, I can't see when I'm sharing my screen. Unfortunately, the chat box becomes inaccessible to me. So I'm relying on our interns here.
So Linda says, when I was in the Best Buy in Plymouth a few weeks ago, they told me they were not accepting batteries anymore. I'm so sorry that happened.
I think they've switched only to reusable batteries, but most counties still will have it. So check your county website, and a lot of times they'll have hazardous material and battery reclamation. So definitely check your county website. Best Buy as a private company sometimes periodically changes what they'll accept based on what they're getting. So even before you go, I would still always check their website just to make sure that what you want to get rid of is still viable. I've dropped off an entire printer to a Best Buy one time, literally just came in, set it down on the service desk. They gave me a receipt and I walked out, but they don't always do it. So double check before you bring your stuff.
Yeah, and Patricia also mentioned some donations are tax deductions.
Yeah, the tax laws have gotten a little bit more complicated as of recently. So most of these nonprofit organizations will still write you a receipt for your donation of what they think an equitable value or what you think an equitable value is. Depending on your individual tax situation, it may or may not be deductible, but certainly not a bad idea to give it a shot.
Okay, so now let's talk about clothing donations. After cleaning out your closet, you may find that you have a lot of clothes that are in good condition, but you just don't wear them anymore. These clothes can be donated to the Women's Center of Montgomery County. The Women's Center operates a thrift store, and proceeds will support the center's domestic violence services. They accept new and gently used clothing for women, men, and children, as well as purses and women's shoes.
I actually used to volunteer at the Second Chances Thrift Shop, which is a nonprofit run entirely of volunteers. I volunteered there until we had to close due to COVID, but thankfully it has since reopened and we welcome your donations. All of the shop's profits go towards supporting victims of family violence, so know that your clothes are going to a good place.
Oh, that's awesome, Mary. Thanks for sharing. Another option for donating clothes is the career wardrobe. They accept new and gently used donations of professional and casual attire, as well as special attire such as scrubs and non-skid shoes. If you are looking to make money off your items, the career wardrobe also offers a consignment option where clients get 50% of the sale price for each item.
We're going to dive deeper into potentially selling some items in the coming slides. Consignment, if you have large quantities of a lot of items, can actually be a really meaningful way to get rid of some of the things. If you only have a couple items, oftentimes consignment shops are less likely to take them. Often they want a large variety. So if you're a collector of something and you have a lot of one type of item or just a lot of items, consignment can be a really good option because it kind of takes the legwork out of selling. You can just kind of bring your stuff to them and they'll kind of do all that for you. So that might be another option if you are someone who has large amounts of certain types of items. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Next, we are going to discuss selling items. Before we get into detail about the types of items that you can sell, we need to discuss something that is very important: seller safety. Finding a buyer for items can be very exciting, and you might be eager for that buyer to come pick up the items right away. It is important to be aware that having a buyer come to your home may not be the safest option, especially if you are home alone. It is recommended that you ask a family member or friend to be present during the exchange with the buyer. An even safer option would be to conduct the transaction in a public space. Ask the buyer to meet you at a Philadelphia Police Department district headquarters. You can conduct your transaction inside the police department, and this avoids someone coming to your house and knowing your address.
So this can also be a really great option, and all of the suburban police departments do this as well. So if you are living in the suburbs, this could still be something. Some of the police departments actually have video cameraed outdoor locations where you can safely conduct your transaction, where they're being constantly monitored by police. You don't physically have to go inside. So if you go to those police station websites, they'll definitely have more information. Another thing to keep in mind, obviously with COVID, we want fewer people inside our house, and we especially don't want strangers inside our house. So using the police department outdoor spaces, or potentially even having like a curbside situation set up, is definitely going to be a better option. You, your friend, the seller outside as often as possible.
Now let's discuss selling. You may be thinking of an item in your house that you no longer use and you know you don't need it anymore, but feel it is worth money. This includes valuable items such as jewelry, or maybe you have a classic comic book collection, vintage items such as antiques, or electronics that are gently used and fully functioning. All these items can be put for sale. When putting items for sale, determine a time frame such as 1 to 2 months, and if that item is not sold within that time frame, then either donate it or put it in the trash pile. Here are some websites that you can use to sell your items. Facebook Marketplace allows you to sell items through your personal Facebook account. Simply take pictures of the items you wish to sell and upload it to Facebook Marketplace. You can also include a description or a desired price for each item. Facebook Marketplace does require that you have a Facebook account in order to sell items, so if you don't have an account yet, you can easily create one.
I've personally used Facebook Market and I like it because you can see the profile of the person who's selling the items. And you can also see the profiles of the people commenting and saying that they used this person before. So it makes me feel more comfortable because I can see the seller is a real person and the people commenting are real people.
Yeah, I also have friends that have used Facebook Marketplace and have had positive experiences as well.
If you do have a Facebook account, another option when we're just to kind of go back to thinking about donating is oftentimes on Facebook, they have these no buy groups, and they're literally groups of people who are committed to trying to spend less money on objects. So if there's something that you don't necessarily think is worth significant value, you're interested in donating it, but maybe it's too much to physically get out of your house, or it just seems kind of like a pain to go through the process of posting and trying to weed out sellers, these no buy groups might be a way for you to kind of post some of your things that you want to get rid of in a little bit of a less stressful way.
Another option would be the OfferUp/Let Go app. This is a phone app that allows users to post pictures of the items they wish to sell. On your phone, if you go to the App Store, you can search for this app and download it. And then once it's downloaded, create an account and you can get started selling your items.
There's a lot of similar companies out there too. You may have heard of or seen commercials for Mercari is another one, and they exclusively operate by mail. So if you are especially concerned about interacting with people right now, which we totally understand, that could be a great alternative to something like this because everything is shipped. So you never have to actually see the person, you never actually have to have physical contact, and everything is just done digitally.
So now we're going to talk about storage. Storage is used for items that serve a functional purpose but are not used on a daily basis. This includes holiday decorations, seasonal items such as patio furniture or a beach umbrella, and items that are only used for special occasions like a folding table and folding chairs. You want to be mindful that items in storage don't pile up and you only store the items that you are going to use. When deciding what items to put in storage, use the suitcase analogy. This states that you should treat storage as you do when you have to pack for a trip, meaning only take the essentials and the stuff you know you are going to use. If you haven't used an item within the past 1 or 2 years, then you probably don't need that item and it should not be stored. These items can be donated, sold, or thrown out instead.
So even though they might be less of a problem for you because they're in storage, be honest with yourself because they're still taking up space. So I know for myself, even in my holiday box, I have like 3 or 4 items that I never bring out. I should just donate them or trash them depending on their quality because they're just taking up valuable space and potentially leading me to now have an additional storage box that I need. So really think about those things that you've kind of glossed over for a couple years and you're not needing as trying to get rid of them. We do have a tendency to just think, I'm just going to keep it for later. If you're really committed to this decluttering process, really start to evaluate what you need. Now I see someone who just called in unmuted. Did you have a comment?
You know, there are mounting poles to remove Postmaster Joe.
Hello? I'm thinking not. All right, let's keep going.
Next, we have the items in your home that you should keep, like those functional items just mentioned before. Just remember to place them in storage when they're not in use. Also, we have memorabilia, the things that we keep and collect because of their historic value to us. We collect and collect until the collection has taken over our home.
I actually used to collect coffee cups all the time, but then they started taking up way too much space. So I actually started gifting them to family and friends because, you know, you can only drink 1 cup of coffee at a time.
That's so true. I see someone just commented in the chat. Patricia, my big question for later, what to do with keepsakes. We will definitely be touching on that. Thank you, Patricia. Okay, so we do understand the importance of these items, these memorabilia, but let's talk about some tips to keep the memorabilia close to your hearts, but while freeing up space in your homes. If you can't decide whether keeping the item is critical to the memory, lend the item to a family member to hold temporarily. So if you can still remember the memory or you find that you don't miss the item, then the item you lend it out to a family member can be donated out. I just see that someone else commented in the chat. I don't want to miss your comments. Shirley, memory items are a significant problem for me. Oh yeah, it's a problem for a lot of us. It's hard. Sentimental items, I do mention, it's the hardest part of decluttering. So We will
We're
take
gonna
the
go
time.
through
Take
a
time.
lot. Yeah, we're gonna go through a
Mhm.
lot with this because this is something we all have a hard time with. And we can definitely, again, at the end too, kind of dive into some specific items that you might want to talk about. But we have definitely some stuff for that we want to cover for sure.
Yeah, we definitely. Yes, on the next slide. You can go to the next slide. We'll talk about sentimental items a little deeper and understanding that once again, this is the hardest part of the decluttering process. So hopefully these few tips will help you guys out. One of the suggested ways to hold on to the memories of loved ones, if you can't decide to discard them, could be consolidating the items. Like for example, my grandmother, she had collections of antiques like her furniture and china. So maybe your mothers or grandmothers passed similar antiques onto you, or you decided to build your own collections. So a good way is to consolidate them. Let's, for example, say you don't need all sets or 50 sets of a salt and pepper shaker collection. So instead, you should just keep 2 or 3 that are really important to you, and then take pictures of the entire collection. That way you have the smaller pieces, the 2 or 3 that you kept of the bigger collection, and then you have a way in the pictures to see the entire collection. You can also consider making the pictures into a scrapbook. You can make a physical scrapbook or a digital one on the computer or in your phone. That way you can always look at the memories at any moment, and it won't take up too much space in your house.
A tip too with consolidating is to consider trying to give some of the way to some friends or family members who also value something similar. So as Tavi mentioned, if you have another family member who might be interested in a particular one of your salt and pepper shakers that they would have on display, that's a great way to kind of declutter out of your house, but still have potential to have some connection with that item, because every time you go to their house, you might be able to see it. And oftentimes with our collectibles, a lot of us appreciate when other people are really going to be able to use and treasure some of our collectibles. So it might be a great way to actually give even more meaning to some of your sentimental items.
Here on the next slide, we have a couple more tips. Here we'll talk about saving the memory and not the clutter, because we want the important thing to be known that the memory resides in your head and your heart and not the actual object. But if you can't part with the object completely, then this other tip is to repurpose it into smaller pieces that you can hang on to. So instead of keeping like all the cards or letters and some favorite clothing items, you can have the letters transferred onto fabric and sewn together into a memory quilt or even a wall poster. That way you still have the memory, but you don't have to hold on to all that paper and clothing.
I actually have always collected birthday cards and used to have a giant bin full under my bed. I started putting the cards into scrapbooks, and this makes my collection more organized and it saves a ton of space under my bed.
Yeah, I collect birthday cards too. Does anyone else here collect birthday cards?
I've saved every thank you note I've ever gotten from a client or student. So I've also had to kind of go through and find an easier way to store those. And I find that a book or pictures are definitely a great way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So like we said, this is a hard process with the sentimental items. So if you do find that it's too hard, then maybe if necessary, you can ask someone to help you with the process. I think Shirley said, I also collect cards for my husband. Yeah. So that would be nice scrapbook to save the space. All right. So lastly, to our simple steps of decluttering, we have to reward yourself, because removing clutter is no easy task. So, and you devoted your time to remove the clutter. You made the hard decisions of having to take out the items that you held close to your heart. You neatly organized the few items you did decide to keep. You did it. And so you need a reward. So maybe at the end of each week, or even at the end of a small project, you just take a moment to do something you enjoy. And this could be as simple as a cup of coffee, eating some chocolate cake, having a glass of wine, or just letting yourself scroll through cute puppy videos on Facebook, knowing that you earned that break.
I know to reward myself after like a long day or a big project that I've completed. I love ice cream. So sometimes I just go and get a little bit from my local ice cream shop.
Yeah, the treats you can eat are the best.
Now, you have to be particularly careful. If you know that your tendency is that you you reward yourself by shopping, you need to make sure that you're not restarting this cycle by bringing more things into your house. We're specifically going to talk about how to be a gatekeeper for clutter in later slides, and how to deal with even some more particularly challenging items. But if that's your tendency, if shopping is your comfort, really try to be intentional about what you're buying, why you're buying it, and where you're going to put it before you do.
Now we'll discuss some of our top tips and important reminders for various rooms in your home. We won't be going into full detail of each room, but on the handout that we provided, there are a ton more helpful tips organized by each room. So you should definitely use that as a resource.
Some of you may find that there's certain rooms that are particularly challenging. That handout can really help you as a guide for some of the challenges that we found people having a harder time with in that particular space.
Yeah. So first up, we have the cardboard box test. So if you're not sure what you use and what you don't use in your kitchen, this is a great way to find out. You empty out the contents of your kitchen utensil drawer into a cardboard box. For 1 month, you only put back the utensils into the drawer only if you take it out of the box to use it. So as you need the items, you go in the box, you take it out, and then once it's clean, you get to put it back in your drawer. And I also suggest, if you don't already have a drawer organizer, that you should get one, because it's an easy way to keep your utensils neatly sorted and organized. So at the end of this month, whatever is left in the box, you should seriously consider discarding. Because let's face it, if it's still in the box after 4 weeks, you don't need it. This is a great tip to reduce the number of stirring spoons, spatulas, tongs, and the many silverware that has accumulated over the years. Oh, there's a comment in the chat real fast. Linda, I have a 1 in and 1 out rule for my closets. If I buy a new item and put it in my closet, an old item has to come out. That is a great tip that we will be talking about later. So I'm happy that you already do that.
So with the cardboard box test, keep in mind that right now things are a little bit unusual, right? So some of you may have kind of yearly parties where you use certain types of equipment for, there's a certain, you need more tongs because you're going to have these parties or something like that. Keep in mind and give yourself a little bit of grace, considering what we're going through right now, that if you can say, you know what, I really am going to get back to that when things kind of return a little bit more to normal, that you may keep some of those extra items. Consider storing them though, so that they're out of your way for daily use. And so it feels a little bit less cluttered if you know it's something that you're only going to use for 1 or 2 yearly events or something along those lines.
Okay, now I can admit that there are some items in the kitchen that we don't use every month, like a vegetable peeler for me. I don't use it monthly, but I do like to make home fries, so I need it in order to peel my potatoes. So that, even if I didn't use it that month, I will take it out the cardboard box and put it in my drawer. So you guys probably have similar items like that. We just have to be honest, like Brianna said, we know if we're really going to use it and if we're not. So if we're not, then we should, either donate it or discard it.
We all have our favorite spatulas. So let's be honest that maybe we don't need 3 others.
So next up, we have the reverse hanger trick. This is something that I absolutely love. This is right here is my personal biggest struggle. I shop and I shop and I shop and I tell myself it was on sale, so I just had to get it. And then I end up not even wearing it that year because some of the items are seasonal. So it's like, oh, by the time I'm wearing all my other clothes, it's summer. I might not even wear it the next year. That's how much stuff that I buy. So this right here is good to really zone in on those problems. And also the problem of us having clothes in our closet that they don't fit anymore because they're all too big. I'm sure we can relate to that problem. So what you do here is you take all of your garments that's on your hanger and you put them in backwards. So now that the open end of the hanger faces you. Here in the before picture, we have an example of the way we usually put our hangers in. And the after picture shows the new reverse way where the open end is facing you. So after everything has been properly reversed, you then set a calendar reminder for 12 months from now. Then you go back to your regular routine. Every time you wear a piece of clothing, you go to put it back, you make sure that the hanger faces the usual way where the opening is not facing you, like the before picture. So once the 12 months are up, you'll know exactly what you didn't touch. Now, what to do with the untouched items. You pull out all the untouched items and you analyze what they have in common. Are they a certain material, color, or style? Do any of them still have tags on? Are they items that you bought just because they were on sale? My problem. And then next, you should compare them with the clothes you did wear. And maybe you'll notice that you stopped wearing darker clothes in favor of the lighter pastels, or vice versa. Or maybe you avoided wearing items because they needed ironing or dry cleaning. So you have to be honest. Is there any valid reason to hang on to the clothes that you didn't touch? Maybe you haven't been wearing it because it was hidden behind so many other clothes. So we can use this opportunity to let go of the items that we're truly not using or serving us. So after a year, if it has not been flipped around, then highly consider it to be sold, donated, or recycled.
This can also be a really great way for you to help aid yourself in being your own gatekeeper to clutter. If you are finding there are certain colors you are just not wearing anymore, there are certain fabrics you are not wearing, or you're finding that certain care instructions have just really not been something you wanted to wear because you don't want to go to the dry cleaners or you don't want to iron, that's all very valid. So then be that gatekeeper and don't buy those items. And make sure your family knows that you are no longer interested in dry clean only items if that is something you're finding you're just not doing. Now, again, to be fair, the last year has been difficult for a lot of us. And some of us may have found that we're maybe not going physically to church as much. So maybe we're not wearing dress clothes. Maybe we're not physically going into the office. So some of our dressier work clothes are also not being worn. Again, you can give yourself a little bit of grace with that, but make sure that they still fit. Make sure they're still in fashion and make sure it's still something that when you do return to those activities at their full capacity, you're going to still want to use that item or need to use that item.
Yes, very true. Next here in the bathroom. So we tend to have a drawer full of products, some old ones, new ones, or ones we barely touch. We test out the products and then we end up not sticking with it, but we never actually discarded it.
I know I'm very guilty of this. I have a drawer full of makeup products that I have tried out for a few weeks and then I didn't like it. But I recently started going through my drawer of foundations and getting rid of the ones that I no longer use and the ones that are expired.
I know I have a few face creams that I tried out and didn't like. I ended up keeping it in my bathroom cabinet because I keep telling myself I'll use my legs and I still haven't yet.
That's funny. I would have never thought of that. I know I always think that, oh, well, what if I need it later? Or maybe someone else might need it, so I'll hold on to it. However, these old unnecessary bath products, they do have an expiration date. So these half empty products that we're currently not using, the lotions, the sunscreens, and the face creams, they have to go because they expire. It's important to discard them because they can start to become discolored or they can start to smell when they're stored for too long. Here on the slide, I have examples of expiration date symbols that are pictured on many face cream jars and some lotions. They look like little face cream jars with the lid open. The number inside the symbol means that either 3, 6, 18, or 8 months from now, from after opening the item, that is no longer good to use. So look out for these symbols and their expiration dates and trash any products that have passed those dates. But if you have any unopened products in your bathroom that are not expired, they can be gifted to family members or donated to homeless shelters, women's centers, and some churches.
I think a lot of people have been gifted like lotion and body and body wash sets that maybe aren't really your style, or maybe you just don't use because your skin is sensitive. Those are items that are often highly desirable at homeless shelters and women's centers. So that might be something to think about. Usually at this point of the presentation, I get a lot of questions as well about medications, and those are tough. So the first thing is definitely go through your medications once a year. Make sure all of your over-the-counter stuff hasn't expired, because even ibuprofen has an expiration date. For your prescription medications, this is where it gets a little bit trickier. So even over-the-counter or prescription medications cannot and should not be thrown in the trash or down the toilet. I know that that's a really common thing that a lot of people do, but we really should avoid it at all costs, because A, it can clog up the sewage system, and B, we're finding that it actually can get into our water supply. So not a good thing. So the nice thing is, while you're on that county website looking for hazardous materials disposals or battery disposal dates, things of that nature, oftentimes they will have drug take back dates too. The nice thing that I've been finding is CVS pharmacies actually now, a lot of them have medication take back containers, giant vaults near the pharmacy where they will take back anything. So any prescription left over from a surgery, maybe for pain management, that you're no longer using. If your dosage has changed and it's unlikely that you're going to go back to that lower dosage medication that is expired, over the counter or prescription, you can just go and drop it off there or at one of these county take back days. The only thing that you want to make sure you do is take the label off before you actually put it in there, because there's no need for your personal information and address to be out there.
Now let's talk about how to declutter things left in the house. How many people here still have items in their home that belong to their grown children? Well, my mom does too. She has a lot of my kindergarten artwork. We recognize the emotional value of items, and it can be hard to let go. And maybe your children might need something again, perhaps an old bracket, a neglected saxophone, or a chair from their old college apartment. But don't let clutter rule your home, because your children might need something again someday. When decluttering, make sure you search for items from the entire house, including all the closets, the garage, the attic, and the basement. Go through items and keep only things that are meaningful to you. Keep 1 or 2 items of your children's clothes and art. Ask your kids if you can toss anything that is soiled, stained, or broken. Confirm with your children if they know you have heirlooms you hope to pass down, and have an honest conversation about the future of these items. Perhaps they also will allow you to donate unsentimental items like old clothing, unnecessary textbooks, and used household items. And most importantly, set a deadline for your children to retrieve their belongings. If they live out of the area, take pictures of the items and have them decide if they want to keep it. Agree upon a realistic date when they can come take these items out of your home. Encourage your children to take anything they want to sell, because this chore should not belong to you. Once your children have decided what they're keeping, donate or toss any remaining items.
It's really important that
Before we move on,
it's really important that you have really open and
Brianna.
honest conversations with your children about this. I've worked with a lot of adults who find that they're keeping things without their children's knowledge, and that their children don't actually want. We often find some differences in generational interests, right? So I've worked with a lot of folks who have really beautiful heirloom collections, things like china or some other items that they haven't actually talked to their children about. And when they do, they find their children don't have space or don't have a desire to keep those items. So make sure, if you're holding on to any heirlooms or any kind of furniture, supplies, things like that for your kids, that they're aware. See if they will take it back. It is not your responsibility to hold on to everything forever. And while it's okay if you know they're in a situation right now where maybe they can't, or there's a possibility if they're moving back into your home to keep their room as it is, it's absolutely reasonable for you to also try to reclaim that, maybe as a guest room or an activity space, whatever you feel is going to make your house more usable for you.
So we have some comments that came in. Roz asked, is there an easy way to get labels off of prescription bottles? And then Lida replied, nail polish remover can help get the labels off or mess with them enough so no one can read them. I actually do that all the time.
Yeah, nail polish remover is a great one. Goo Gone is an easy product if you have it lying around, but I don't think you necessarily need to buy it. If you have, but my favorite of all time, if you have gel-based hand sanitizer, that just destroys the adhesive immediately. So you can just kind of get that. And again, the label doesn't need to be perfectly off, just enough so that your information is not legible, readable, that kind of thing. Great questions. Great questions.
Yeah, I've actually also used Sharpie too, if you really can't get the label out. So
Yes.
Before we move on, let's quickly talk about your children's old books, toys, and games. You may want to keep beloved children's books, games, or toys for future grandchildren who may or may not materialize. Assess your space. If you have enough room, store one box of your favorites and then donate or sell the rest. Sentimental baby items. So let's talk about whether your children know you have these items and want to keep it. If not, think about creating a shoe-sized box for each children where you can save these meaningful items. You might select a favorite article of clothing, an ultrasound photo, or perhaps their first pair of shoes. And regarding expensive items when you purchase them, such as a wedding dress, musical instrument, or fine dishes and glassware, these are items you can donate or sell. Regarding spouses or family members that have passed away, it may be tempting to just hold on to all of your loved ones' belongings, but it's important to be practical and make healthy choices for yourself. Start with your own belongings. This really serves as a warm-up. This is a chance to experience decluttering in a less emotionally challenging area. And then save for yourself. Deciding on what to keep for yourself is the hardest part. Keep in mind that there are some alternatives to keeping the physical objects. For example, is it something that you could take a picture of, photocopy and digitalize, or take a video of it? Memories don't always have to be tangible. Another alternative is breaking down multiple pieces and forming one larger piece. As Tavi mentioned earlier, you could take different sections of your loved one's dresses or shirts and break them down to make one large quilt. This can be done with a number of different clothing items. Next is to save for others. If there's something that you know you don't have space for, or that you know somebody else would really find valuable, then save it for them. Ask them if it's something that they would like to keep. If you have a large family, this is a great way to be able to hold on to more things without actually keeping them inside your home. A friend of mine was given some of her late uncle's Hawaiian shirts, and she sewed some of them into pillowcases. I thought this was a really great idea. Next is to sell, donate, or throw away. Remember, the purpose of keeping belongings after a loved one has passed away is to cherish their memory. You should feel confident selling or donating items that really aren't a true reminder of that person. If someone else can get some benefit out of the items, then their belongings are becoming a force for good. Hopefully, knowing that these items you're giving away are going to help someone else allows you to release them with purpose and goodwill.
This is usually one of the hardest aspects of decluttering. And for that reason, we really do recommend that you leave this until one of your last things. So this should not be in your top 5 list. This is something that after you've kind of mastered your daily routine of decluttering and you feel like you have the rest of your spaces, I would recommend tackling this. We also really recommend bringing someone else who can kind of walk you through this, someone you trust, someone who understands your relationship with the person who has passed away, so that they can be respectful and kind of help you through this process, because it really is challenging and it really is something that can take a lot more time than the rest of your decluttering process.
So next we're going to talk about how to avoid new clutter. Top tips. The key to preventing clutter creep is having a few habits and routines to stay on top of the clutter so you never have to start decluttering all over again. One of the easiest ways to prevent clutter creep is with regular maintenance decluttering sessions. Every once in a while, go through various clutter areas so it doesn't pile up. A great time to do maintenance decluttering sessions is when you're using the space. Take a few minutes to quickly check for clutter and put things back where they belong as you use the space. When you get in the habit of doing this often, it will only take a few minutes because you'll be consistently maintaining the space already. Use the one in, one out rule, as Lydia mentioned earlier. Whenever you're bringing something new into your home, make an effort to find one or more things to get rid of in its place. I do this often with kitchen gadgets. If I buy a new strainer, the old one needs to go. Another simple habit to keep clutter from piling up in your home is to use the one-touch rule. The idea is simple. Aim to touch an item only once after using it. Instead of putting it down somewhere to be dealt later, put it away in its home right away. I try to do this with my scissors because I can never find them when I need them, so now I try to put them back right after I finish using them. And do daily resets if the one-touch rule doesn't work out. As nice as it would be to always put things back every time we're finished using them, sometimes life happens and things don't get put away. A daily reset is a quick sweep through your house where you pick up items and return the space to its baseline state where things are put away and tidy. Pick a time of day or a couple of times a day and reset your spaces to stay on top of clutter and mess.
So this is actually a great way to use the 15 minutes that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, just to like reset your space. You can just only take a couple minutes.
So
And
think about
lastly,
too, the
embrace empty space.
So think about those reclaimed times, right? So really when you're doing your resets, think about the wasted times, waiting to pull something out of the oven. That's like the best time to do those daily resets.
And lastly, let's embrace the empty space. Learning to embrace the empty space you create when you declutter is a great way to prevent clutter creep as well. When you declutter a space and are left with empty space or less full space, don't be in a rush to fill it back up with new stuff. Instead, live with it for a while and enjoy the extra breathing room you've created. You don't need to fill every space in your home. Embracing the empty space until that space becomes your new normal is a great way to prevent clutter creep. Now we're going to talk about how to be a gatekeeper as things enter your home. A great way to prevent clutter creep is by catching clutter before it even has a chance to come into your home. Before you bring new stuff into your home, or as soon as it enters the house, take a quick minute to decide if it's truly necessary, something that will be used, or simply clutter. Even something as simple as dealing with garbage or recycling right away is a great way to prevent clutter creep from happening.
Something that works great for my family is we have a recycling bin near our front door, and so we toss the junk mail in straight away as we're walking into the house.
That's a great idea, Nicole. I get a lot of junk mail and usually I just let it pile up until it becomes too much. For holidays and birthdays, ask for the gift of experiences. Sometimes they come with less packaging and usually they come with more memories. Ask for relaxing, indulgent gifts such as a gift certificate or a gift certificate for a massage or a spa day, or classes and education such as learning about herbs or how to make cheese, or something on the home front like a house cleaner for a day, a month, or a week. And when it comes to receiving gifts, use the one in and one out policy to ensure that nothing gets too out of control. For example, you get a gorgeous pair of sunglasses from your friend for your birthday. Take out one pair of sunglasses that you don't want any longer and remove it from your home. If they're in good condition, take it to a donation center. If you stick to this policy, then you should always have space for what you want, need, and stuff shouldn't take over anymore. Be a gatekeeper before things enter your home. Another way to prevent clutter creep is by being intentional about things before they become yours or make it into your home. This is especially important when shopping and buying new things. Make a point of asking yourself a few questions to be an intentional gatekeeper about what enters your home. Ask yourself why you want to buy it. Is it truly needed, or is it an impulse purchase or an emotional purchase? Do you have a place to keep it so it won't cause clutter? Another great way to be a gatekeeper is by waiting before you buy something. Wait at least 24 hours, or ideally even more time, between deciding whether you want to buy something or actually buying it. Often, when you give yourself time and space to think over a purchase, you can recognize what is needed, thoughtfully purchased, and what totally isn't necessary. Next up, bulk items, but buying in bulk isn't something I'm really good at. So, Tavi?
Yeah, no worries. I got it. Buying in bulk, it can be practical and a good way to save money, but there are some things that you don't necessarily need to buy in bulk. We have to ask ourselves, do I really need that much of an item? So let's say like peanut butter. If you only use it a few times a month for sandwiches, then you don't need a jumbo pack of 2, 4, 6, 8. You just don't need it. So, but there are some items that, we do need in bulk because we use them every day. Let's say like paper towels or toilet paper. And we learned from the pandemic that those essential items are a hot commodity and people love to buy them in bulk. So make sure you get some.
Thanks, Tavi. Now, here's another great motto to remember: a place for everything and everything in its place. One big cause of clutter is simply items that don't have a home. These are the kinds of things that float around the house, sitting on counters or floors, causing clutter wherever they go. Each item you choose to keep in your home should have a place where it belongs.
It's really important too that when you're being the gatekeeper, you have conversations with family and friends that you are trying to work to declutter and or downsize. If your family doesn't know, you are far more likely to get more objects or more things that you may not need or may not want and just end up contributing to your clutter. So have those conversations with family. I've had to have many of these conversations with my own father, as he's a carpenter who thinks I literally need every single tool in the world to function as an adult. So I've had to turn down about 3 tile cutters at this point in my life because I don't have the storage space. And that's an okay conversation. You also don't have to feel bad about turning things down. People mean well, but they don't necessarily know your specific space limitations or how you really want to live your lifestyle. So at the end of the day, it's really about you taking over your space, how you want it, so that you can really facilitate potentially staying in this home for a long term or moving to a home that better suits your needs.
Now let's get to some additional resources. These resources are all listed on the last page of the decluttering handout, so we won't go too into depth about them. So the first is Senior Transition Services. They offer assistance in removal of clutter and reorganizing the home. Their services include downsizing and preparing for a move, content removal, and organizing and decluttering your home. Next is Ralston My Way. They offer services relating to organizing like packing boxes and rearranging furniture so you don't have to. A consult with the Ralston My Way social worker can help with getting more resources and extra help with clutter removal.
I personally worked with this organization for about 5 years now. And the nice thing and how I would best recommend you to use them is you can hire them for hourly services. So if there are larger jobs that you want to tackle, you could hire someone for an hour to come in and help you with some of those larger jobs, heavy lifting, areas that maybe you'd have to climb up on the ladder that you just don't feel comfortable. If that's your current situation, that could be a great way to utilize their resources.
And last is the National Organization of Professional Organizers, or NAPO. This organization of professional organizers can help with the reorganization of your home. Some professionals will provide a free over-the-phone or in-home consult. However, please note that this organization does not have services that are all free. Check with your local professional organizer for quotes and fees. Now let's wrap this all up with some general concepts and review. We've gone through a lot of information, and I wanted to highlight some main takeaways. Remember that tasks that take 30 seconds or less should be completed right away. Use mantras to keep you going when the decluttering gets hard. My personal favorite is, your desk is a work surface, not a storage area. Think twice before buying an item, and use some of the tips and tricks we provided today throughout the process. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We hope you had a fun time and learned some tips on how to make more space for your place. We look forward to seeing you at our next class. And we are open for questions, and remember that if you are calling in, you can unmute yourself with *6.
Feel free to use the chat box, or I know there's a lot of us here too, so if you want to raise your hand if you have a specific question or a specific thing that we did not hit on. One thing I do want to talk about, because I know a couple of you have already brought up issues of paper, and we have talked about potential for digitization with that. We do have a digital decluttering class, which if that's something that you feel might benefit you, definitely let Mary Angela know, and we can come on back and talk about digital decluttering. But oftentimes just the use of binders can be a great way to kind of keep yourself organized. Tab binders, using a scanner that can scan things in so you can get it on the computer and physically out of your space is another great option for some of these paper. Also consider some of your bills. If you're willing and interested and you're pretty tech savvy, go paperless for some of them. You can still set reminders to remind you to pay those bills monthly because you're not going to have that mail queue coming every month, but you could set a reminder up on any smart home device, on a phone, write it on your calendar on your fridge so that you just have less paper coming into the house to potentially deal with.
Mm-hmm.
I see someone wrote in that they are interested in that digital decluttering class.
Yeah, Shirley.
We'll try to get it up. Maybe we'll try to figure it out, Shirley.
Lida says, I have an appointment, so I have to sign out, but just wanted to thank you all the presenters for a very practical and useful presentation.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming. We're
Thank
so glad
you.
you're here.
Yes, and thank you for participating too.
I just had a question about, it goes along the lines with some of the things you've mentioned about memorabilia, but I have sort of accidentally, I mean, I enjoy it, but I don't know how I came to be the family historian. So any tips maybe about, I've got a lot of, paperwork, the photos, everything. I have digitized the photos with a scanner. That was really helpful because I could then just burn the DVDs and get the copies of the scrapbook photos to everybody, because there's only, there's maybe one scrapbook from my grandfather. So not everyone can have that, but I made copies for everyone. So that was really handy. But the paper work, birth certificates and, all of that, that's important, but that can be overwhelming. Are there any tips? I'm sort of leaning towards binders, and a binder for each person in the family and put all their stuff together, or do you go by generations? I don't know. Any recommendations for that?
So I do think some of that depends on if the person is still living or not, to be 100% honest, because if they're still living, I would definitely recommend making sure that you're storing everything in a fireproof box, obviously just for safekeeping, God forbid, of a house fire. So you have that information. If they are still living, that would be my recommendation. And you could have just a fireproof box for that one individual. So if you become like an executor or power of attorney for someone who's no longer able to do it on their own, that would be my recommendation. Get a fireproof box just of their documents, and then have a supplemental binder with pockets where if you're going to a meeting, instead of lugging that, we all know those fireproof boxes are about 20 pounds. Instead of lugging that, you can just easily transfer it into, like I have something like this actually right here. It's just a little pocket folder. So I could keep this right next to it. All my documents are fireproof, but then I could just chuck them in here to go to that meeting. If it's more of like a family heirloom for someone who has passed on, and you no longer kind of need those documents on a daily basis. Obviously, if there's still like a trust situation, the fireproof box is still the way to go, because you don't want to risk those documents being lost. But I would, at that point, I really like the use of binders with the covers that the little, I usually have one handy, and I do actually have one handy. I have it right here. See, you've got a lot of things. So I have these little just slip covers for my documents, and they're just clear plastic. I can slip my documents in and out. And so for family heirloom type things, the nice thing is this is going to keep it waterproof. It's going to prevent it from aging, and it's just going to still be a handy way, because now I can flip through this entire binder of these little clear sheets and not have a problem. So that could be a really great option as well. But I do think ultimately the determination does need to come from if the person is living or deceased. I also don't think it's a bad idea ever to have a computer backup. And I know that you said you put it on a CD. It might even be a better option or an easier option to store it on like an external hard drive. And I specifically say an external hard drive over a flash drive. So the problem with, these little flash drive guys is these actually break quite easily. So you have to be careful with the flash drives, because if you are buying inexpensive ones, these can break really easily, versus an external hard drive, which I have one, I think it's sitting right here. I have all my stuff out that I thought I was going to need, but it looks like that's on my other desk. I apologize. But, I have one this big, and it's really tiny, but it holds a ton of things. So having that digital backup is a great idea, even for some of those kind of documents. If you can scan them in, you can even now, an easy way to do that if you don't have a scanner that would tolerate it. So if you do have like a printer, scanner, copier, and you can just open the top and kind of scan that in, that's a great way to do it. But there's a lot of good scanner apps on your cell phone now that actually do a pretty good job of cropping and keeping the quality. So you could easily go into an app store, download a scanner, and just kind of take those pictures from your camera and then kind of file them into another digitized version. So you really have the options are kind of endless. I think some of the concern is always, what are you doing with the originals? That's what I hear complaints about the most, is what do I do with the originals? And then I think, again, if they're living, fireproof box is a great way with an easy transport. Back up the digitized, obviously, but keep the originals maybe in some small container, the binder with the little slippy guys in them. Something like that is going to be a better option for sure.
Thank you. Those are good ideas. Thank you.
We had a question from Patricia. Where can we access the handout?
I believe Mary Angela is going to send it to everyone who has registered.
I got mine.
You got it emailed?
I got it sent in my email, so.
Beautiful. So check your email. If you did not get that, then definitely reach out to Mary Angela. She'll be able to provide that for you for sure. Are there any other questions that anybody has? Any other challenging spots that you're really struggling with? You know, one thing we kind of talked about some of the strategies for, you know, retaking over an office space too. And one of the easiest ways to kind of start that process might just be, again, to find that dedicated workspace, even if it is only a portion of your dining room table, which some of us have definitely had to do, if not permanently, at least temporarily, is to kind of make it feel more like a desk. Get, you know, even just using a mug to store a couple pens and pencils in, having a spot for a pad of paper, just something as simple as a desk organizer to stack papers on can make it so that that space feels a lot cleaner and nicer for you and still just as functional, and then easily movable because you just have everything in that desk organizer space or a mug for all of your pens and pencils, things like that. That can be definitely something, you know, just kind of dedicate the space and ensure that you're kind of doing those daily clutter checks and filing those papers at the end of the day. If there are more printed stuff or notes, I tend to be a note writer. So, and I love to jot things down. So I just made the switch to a tiny little whiteboard next to my desk so that I can avoid having scraps of paper everywhere. And then I can take my notes, anything that needs to get transferred, I either email it to myself or put it in a document where I need it. But those kind of like silly notes that are reminders to like call this person or call that person instead of wasting the paper and then having more mess on my desk, the whiteboard helps me. So there's a lot of strategies that are out there that you can. And I know, you know, this one's a little bit fancy, but we just took you know, you can get those from the dollar store for $1 and they do last pretty long as well. So don't underestimate the organizing capacity of your local dollar store, because we can all honestly attest that they have some of the best stuff around for kind of keeping yourself organized.
Mhm.
We had another question in the chat that says, I'm retaking my entire house. Which area should I start with? I work on my dining room table.
So definitely a personalized question but a good question. So I would first sit down and ask yourself which spaces interfere most daily with your productivity. So if you are working on your dining table, is that where you need to start? Is the space just not making it so that you can get your work done? Is it interfering? Are there other spaces that are interfering? And then write that top 5 list first. So what are the top 5 places that interfere with your either lifestyle or productivity? That's the best place to start. Go through those. If you feel like, yeah, my workstation is a little bit messy, but that's totally fine and my brain works better that way, that's valid. So you don't necessarily have to start there. But if you find that it's taking you way too long to even get to your workstation because your bathroom medicine cabinet, you're ruffling through 10 minutes every morning and it's slowing you down, that would be a great place to start. If you find that during work, you look over at that kitchen countertop that's got a stack of bills or mail or other stuff, and you just think, oh man, I should be doing that, then there you go. You have your number 1 answer. So really be honest with yourself about how is clutter in a certain space either slowing me down, interfering with my lifestyle, or making me like less productive and less capable of doing what I want to do. And that's going to be where your top 5 list starts. And again, I encourage you to think small. So don't think basement, think this shelf on the basement where all of my holiday stuff is, because I have beautiful holiday decorations that I'd like to bring out seasonally, but it's so disorganized. I'm going to start with my Easter stuff. Because it's the next holiday coming, and then I'm going to do my Thanksgiving stuff, and then I'm going to do my Christmas stuff. But really, it's such a personal decision. So I would really, again, ask yourself those questions. What is slowing me down? What is taking away valuable time from my day? And start that top 5 list of places and break them down even smaller, individual shelves, individual cabinets, things of that nature. That's a great question. Well, we all really appreciate your time, and we appreciate you coming out and being so participatory. It's sometimes hard to lecture on Zoom when you can't see everybody. So we're so glad that you all were here and active and participatory, and it was nice to see all your faces. And if there's ever any questions, you can feel free to, again, if it's more about the handout and you didn't get that, definitely reach out to Mary Angela. If you have any specific questions about decluttering and are having a hard time getting the process started, you can feel free to contact the Salis Occupational Therapy Clinic, which does provide free services. So we might be able to look at your individual situation. That email is the letter O as in otter, the letter T as in Tommy, the letter I as in Iris, at salis.edu. So OTI@salis.edu. You can feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions.
Yeah, Mary put the email in the chat box.
Got it. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.